Hi, everybody, and welcome. Today, I've got the pleasure of interviewing Lawrence Lanoff. He's the creator of tantra-x. And Lawrence, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate your time.
It is my pleasure. Absolutely. Thank you.
So I know that we're under some time constraints because you've got something really exciting coming up here in about an hour. I think you want to just mention that real quick.
Yeah, I'm getting interviewed for a documentary on masculinity. So that's
Wow.
yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. I really I love that we can continue to change the face of what it is to be a man. I think that's a great thing. So excited
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting for me too because I'm excited first off that I got a chance to interview for close to an hour, and I appreciate that, especially knowing that you've got all these other great things going on. I'm looking forward to the tantra-x product coming out, and I'm really looking forward to this interview because I think it will help a lot of folks that are wondering about you and wondering about the product. How is it really going to benefit them,
Right.
and maybe how can it help them become a better human being in general. So I'm going to get right to it, just so I'm respectful of your time.
Thank you.
And so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of who Lawrence Lanoff is, and how you got started, how you came to know Tantra, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's so I am the best way I could describe myself is I am a very I will say sort of an eclectic human being in the sense that I was born and raised in New York City. I have really grown up in an urban environment and an artist community, and yet at the same time I've led this background of being a photographer. I was shooting professionally when I was in my early teens, and had a career as a filmmaker, and still work on projects that I love right now. But growing up in this sort of semi-bohemian environment, I had the honor of being exposed to a tantra master when I was 11 years old. Yeah.
Wow.
It- yeah, it's crazy because I hadn't really, I mean, I didn't even know what an orgasm was. I didn't know I had understood. I have always moved a lot of sexual energy in my body. And so I had always been, curious about this stuff. But having the opportunity to meet an honest to goodness tantric master who grew up in the jungles of South America, that was amazing, and he came at a time where being a teenager, especially a teenage boy, and growing up in the city, I was exposed to a lot of things. Probably 90% of them I should not have been exposed to, but it did a number of things. One is it opened my mind a tremendous amount to the diversity of human sexuality. That's one thing New York City did. It left me very non-judgmental. It left me very open-minded. And then I met this tantric master who was like, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to teach you how to control your orgasm, and I'm going to teach you how to build sexual energy. I'm going to teach you how to project energy. I'm going to teach you how to make her come a lot." And I was like, "Oh, sure, yeah, 11." I mean, I actually had no idea what he was talking about for a lot of that. But think of it like, wax on, wax off. You're doing these exercises, you don't even really know what they're for, but when the time was there and I really matured as a young adult coming up, and had my first sexual experience with a young woman, all of a sudden it was like, it was like, oh, I know how to ride this bicycle. I don't even know exactly how I know how to, but boom, I had balance. And and it was hilarious because because my first experience was very sweet and really positive and very tantric, and I had total orgasm mastery, and it was hilarious. And I was like, it was just funny. Not a normal experience for a 14-year-old. So anyway, so that is the kind of the background of coming to sexuality, growing up in New York City, and and then being the young person who lots of older women would come to because they could see that I had a certain care and experience and tenderness and could control, had control of my orgasm. And so it was really funny. Like, I was kind of the go-to young person. And maybe should I say that? Yes, but it's true. So so it's kind of funny. Like, so my background has been very. It's like my view is very compassionate sexuality, because I also have come to realize that the humans in general, like, we all share this. We share this beautiful gift, and it is remarkable. I mean, it's amazing sex, transformational sex is sublime. And the fact that we share this as humans, and yet we've been told that it's not a good thing, creates this intense conflict in a lot of people that I have a lot of compassion for. So that's kind of where I have come to, and how I come to tantra-x specifically, because I had a lot of men, really good men, smart, talented, creative, multimillionaires, very successful. But I noticed one consistent thing is that not many of them had a very satisfying sex life. And that's when I realized, like, wow, there's a real disconnect here, between what I know is possible in the expansion of human pleasure and what people are actually experiencing. And it's sort of the equivalent of, like, it's kind of, to me, the way that I see Tantra, the way I teach it, and I call it Tantra-x because I'm a little bit edgy with this. I cut out a lot of the BS, and I want to, like, really teach you practical stuff. But to me, it's like most people's experience of sexuality is like a sneeze. And it would be sort of like comparing a sneeze to, like, an opera. And once you experience sort of this complexity of sound and music and drama versus, like, and that's kind of how I experience sexuality. It's so diverse, and that's part of what I, how I came to share this stuff. So there you go.
That actually, I'm glad you hit on that, because that leads me to a couple questions. I mean, when the word tantra gets thrown around a lot, I think most people think of it in terms of, well, I guess I should go to Barnes and Noble and get the Kama Sutra or something like that. And I know that when people hear that word, they have a preconceived notion of what it is, and then you've got your experience with tantra. So I guess, and maybe I'll reverse the order of these questions, but what is it that you see when people say, oh, tantra, or I know tantra? What does that really mean to most of the people that you work with? And not yourself first.
Yes, yeah. So let me tell you one thing that I think is most interesting about the way we experience and communicate tantra. Tantra has an ancient philosophy, right? So people either are going to connect with kind of the ancient thing, like, oh, there's this body of knowledge that exists in the world, and I want to know more about this body of knowledge. So there's this historical factor. Then there's this other experience that I see, which is people using the word tantra as a way to say, as a substitute for the word sex, because culturally it's too hard, especially for women, for women to say, oh, I really want to learn about sex, right? Versus, hey, I really want to learn about tantra, right? So if you look at it as a substitute, it's like a polite word that refers to sex, but doesn't bring up necessarily all the cultural shame and guilt and that kind of stuff. So we can have a discussion, an interesting discussion, but especially for women and some guys as well, without having that sort of like icky, like, we're talking about sex, and people start getting squirmy. So, that's all cultural upbringing, by the way, right? There's nothing inherently squirmy about sex. It's just an is, right? It's just an is, but that squirminess is that like, oh, because that's our, because our culture says, hey, look, sex is bad, or pleasure is bad, or it should only happen in this way. And of course, that's not the way it happens. In fact, just do a tiny internet search about sexuality, and you'll realize, like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of it is not just insert it point A into slot B in missionary position, but that's what we're taught, So, so it's like a lot of these words come into the culture so we can have a different discussion without feeling icky about it.
Right, and boy, I'll tell you what, I appreciate that. It's, like you said, we've all got our own cultural upbringing, right? And there's no judgment on this. It's just there's a lot of different people, especially here in the United States and all over the world, but we're really a big melting pot. And, I grew up in a relatively conservative environment, and, have my preconceived notions, and you grew up very differently than I did, which is really interesting to me. I think it's like, wow, there's all these people, and you can go from one extreme of sexuality to, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm extreme, but it's different for sure.
Right.
So I appreciate the kind of compassion that the language that you're using. It's really interesting. It seems very non-judgmental.
Definitely.
It seems gentle also.
Yeah, well, it has to be, man. I mean, it has to be because the reality is like, especially with men who I meet who come in from, really conservative backgrounds, and I meet a lot, come on, I mean, that's a majority of the country really has very conservative values. So there's a lot of shame around sexuality. And so, I am genuinely compassionate because it's what I understand is like a lot of what limits, especially when you're coming from a more conservative background, a lot of what's limiting your pleasure are these belief systems. And so, they seem rational when they're in your head. They seem like, well, this makes sense. That's what mom told me. That's what dad told me. So that's, that's the way it is, right? But with just a modicum of pressure on that belief system, oftentimes they crack and then open you to a tremendous amount of freedom. So, the other side to this is our beliefs keep us from experiencing pleasure. And part of that is because also culturally we're afraid to experience pleasure. So that fear ends up showing up as a bunch of like, well, I don't, I have a specific perspective about how sex should be. And really what that is ultimately a fear that if we were to really let out our desires, that somehow the world would end. And when you realize, like, hey, look, you're just like everybody else, it's no big deal, and when we start to normalize these things, then, a lot of beautiful things happen. So sometimes my most conservative brothers who are like, really like, I grew up a Mormon, or I grew up, in this like, brr, and, and I'm like, okay, cool, let's just try, just take a little paw, let's just poke at this a little bit. And they're like, oh my goodness, because really, there's nothing here. There's nothing I'm saying that's like, you don't need to believe in anything that I'm saying. That's the beauty. Like, I don't need a lot of tantra, and a lot of lineage of sexuality is a lot about, believe this and believe that, and like, I don't care what you believe. Like, just try it out. It's like gravity, here's gravity, boom, it's like, it is what it is. We could say, in my experiences, sex is a lot like that, So, anyway.
Sex is gravity. I've not heard that one before.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's
Yep.
really cool. So, I guess, one of the things that I'm assuming a lot of people might think of is that Tantra is some sort of a formalized, very spiritual, very meditative approach, and I'm not entirely certain that that's exactly what you're talking about. In fact, I get the impression that no, it's really not that. It's not about rules, and it's not about an extreme set of extreme structure or anything like that. It's it's kind of more flowing. Can you I guess there's two questions in this. First thing is, where did the idea for tantra-x come from? And then if you could talk a little bit about tantra-x, the product that you've created here and you're just about to distribute.
Yeah, so the idea for tantra-x came from me having the opportunity to teach this really a secret society of men, you know, like these men who were gathering together to help each other in their lives. And I, while being in that group and coming in to teach about sex and kind of what I would call sort of a form of psychological and body liberation, where you just start to get more comfortable in your expression, in your expressing, I just saw, you know, really good men, and I meet them all the time. So here on one hand I have these, you know, great men who are, like I said, you know, talented and creative and powerful and accomplished, but they're not having the sex lives they deserve, you know, and I mean like the depth and the intimacy and the vulnerability and also the expansion and also the madness, if you will, that ability to go into the sexual madness and share that with another person. And what I mean by that is that, like, you know, what happens when you lose your mind with somebody else in a beautiful way? It's just, it's incredible, right? And people don't have the opportunity they don't even know that's possible. So, you know, like I said, for most men, they're like, okay, I sneezed, and then it's over, right? But there are these layers of sexuality that include what I would call a spiritual transcendence, where you can literally lose sense of your body and just be in this sort of flow of like protoplasm, you know, just in this like seething flow of just ebbing and flowing in your pleasure and expansion and freedom. It's a transcendent experience that I've had in, you know, after weeks of meditation. And so you know, you can attain that in this you know, through sexuality. And so here on the one hand are these men who are basically, you know, using porn as their reference point for how men should be and how you know, and how everything should be, really. And then on the other hand, you've got these, what I'll say, you have these women who are out there completely dissatisfied, and that's a tragic thing, because there's these equally beautiful, remarkable women, powerful women, smart women, yoga women, you know, just playful, like just all over the place, and they're complaining about men, right? So,
for very good reason too.
Right. So I have, you know, great guys, great girls, and I was like, wow, I have got to start bridging this gap, because I've honestly, I mean, I say this very sincerely, like I've never really had somebody, like a woman, who's been like, that sucked, you know. It's like, I don't know, I don't have that in my experience. I don't know what it's like to connect with somebody sexually and them kind of be like, oh, okay, you know, that was sort of mediocre. But I know a lot of people, you know, live in that world. So that's the piece that I just saw, like, there would be so much value in just saying, hey, I'm going to put you two to bed. You both want the same thing, but you just don't have the tools. For women, they lack communication skills a lot of time to say, hey, this is how I like to be touched, or, you know, and guys lack the, like, sensitivity, because we're trained through porn and self-pleasure, or, you know, probably actually, I call it self-pleasure, but for most people it's masturbation, which means, like, you know, like this, like, dirty thing that's happening, and, you know, so as a result, there's, you know, you sort of have guys whose central nervous systems are trained through masturbation and porn, and girls who are dealing with shame and they don't want to be sluts and they don't want to be whores, and these two things are trying to come together, and it really is kind of can be a bit of a car wreck. So that's why I created the tantra-x program, because I was like, with basic skills, and I'm talking simple basic skills, a man can start to gain sexual confidence. I mean real confidence, not the bravado, like, guys are like, oh, yeah, I did, no, come on. I'm not talking high school bravado. I'm talking like the guy who quietly behind that bravado is like, I don't know about my penis size. I wonder if it's big enough. I wonder if I'm really pleasing her. I wonder if she's faking an orgasm. Because look, I don't care who you are. If you're a guy, you've thought about these things, man. Every time you get into bed with a woman, you're like, there's always these issues of comparison, and there's these issues of like wondering and performance, and these play and get in the way of our pleasure. So with some really simple things, and I mean simple, simple in the sense of like the technique is really simple. For example, if you're using feather touch, which is one of the techniques that I'm teaching, right, which is just this really, really, really gentle touch. Like if you can really practice that touch in the moment, that will make a difference. You will see her respond, which builds confidence, which then builds, sort of confidence builds confidence. And that's, so I really want a kind of a deeper masculine confidence, like one that can be both vulnerable. In other words, I don't know, and yet at the same time be confident that the technique or the thing that they have or the skills that they have will help them through the I don't know. And frankly, if you're not getting lost during sex on a regular basis, you're probably really in just a sort of the pattern sneeze sex response. And look, I don't care. I mean, like I said, for some people that is their whole sexual experience. That's what it'll be. But there are men. I mean, I'm meeting more and more men who are just like, I want more. I want deeper connection. I want more intimacy. I want more. Because you can only, I mean, look, for men, we were kind of taught, like, it's numbers, notching the belt, blah, blah, blah. Most guys, especially when they're younger, you can ask them, how many women have you slept with? And they can tell you in an instant. But at some point, let's say whatever that number is, let's just be outrageous. I need to have sex with 10,000 women. At some point, you're going to come to the other side of that, and you're going to be like, is there more? And so tantra-x is kind of the answer to those questions. Is there more? And is there a way that I can connect? Are there practical skills that I can use? And the answer is yes, of course. And some of those skills have a history of thousands of years, which is just kind of cool. There's a lot of things which don't translate over thousands of years, but I think some of these early techniques do. So.
You brought up a couple of really interesting points there. And one of the ones that you didn't say specifically, but you definitely alluded to, was you can help people understand what it is to observe and to learn. And, just the whole feather touch, the way you described it. And, of course, what that requires is you can do the feather touch, but if you don't notice there's a response, when there is, and it's not going to be that level of positive reinforcement, and your confidence won't improve. So, is that accurate? I mean, observation is going to be a really big part of competition.
Yeah, it's what I call, for lack of a better word, I would call it like we could call it like observing ego, or mindfulness. But the idea is, the thing that is very unique about the way our brains are wired is that we have the ability to self-observe. We have the ability to become self-aware. And much of our behaviors are happening in the realm of unconscious, and so a lot of times we're not aware. And so, you know, somebody might come to me with a question, you know, oh, I don't understand, you know, my wife and I are always fighting, and, you know, we're not having sex, and I don't understand, and right, and, you know, for them, they can't see it because a majority of that relationship is happening under the surface, in their unconscious. But I can come in and I can go, well, you know, you walking in the door, ignoring her, and the way your facial expression is, it looks like you're pissed off at her.
Just a normal day's work, right, honey?
That's right. That's right. And so, you know, he might this happened, right, where this guy was just like, he was coming home and he was like,
yeah, I've experienced that.
Yeah. You know, and he's like, I don't know why we're fighting. I mean, and I was like, well, let's look at yourself in the mirror, right? So in other words, these things are happening in the unconscious. He looked at himself in the mirror, and I said, well, what does that expression look like to you? Does that look like a happy guy who's happy to be home, see his woman, you know, or does this look like a guy who's looking for a fight? And he was like, oh, completely out of the realm of his awareness.
Yeah.
But once you pull it forward, it's like, oh, okay. So we have the ability to become self-aware. Sometimes we need a mentor or a guide. A lot of my private work, like I'll do these, like sometimes I do these intensive, what I call kind of a cave day. And the cave day is like where we just go deep, right? And that's, it's not for everybody, but it's the thing that when you reach a point where you go, okay, there are a certain level now of blocks that I need to get at in here. And so skills are great and they're awesome, right? They're very important. You want a skill drill, but you, at some point, you have to encounter your own mind. And that's the process. That's another level of process that that I do cover some of in tantra-x, belief changes, paradigm shifts. And these are really important if you're going to create deep change. And ideally, I want somebody to go through the program and make tangible changes in their lives, because if they do that, everything changes. And that's the power in this stuff. And sex has the motivational power to do all of that. So, you know, I just feel like basically we all have like these Ferraris that we're walking around with, but we're kind of treating them like, you know, what was that car? Like like little Novas, you know, like, yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it's like, no, you know, you have a race car and you've been lied to. You know, it's not your fault. You have been lied to. You have been lied to. There are things in your head right this moment, right this second, that are messing up your ability to live fully. Forget about it sexually, but I'm saying like live in your life, to experience life. And those are all up here. So at some point, you know, we have to go after those things.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you, in asking this question, feels a little weird for me now because we've gone through the interview and, you know, I've spoken with you before, even, and I understand where you're coming from, but I know a lot of other people might not. And,
okay.
You know, if there's some female visitors watching this interview, they might be kind of concerned about the intentions of the tantra-x program. You know, one of the things that's come up from people is like, well, you know, is this just about pickup lines? Is it about taking advantage of women anyway? And I don't feel that way, but could you address that?
Oh, for sure.
What tantra-x is and what it is not, with
Yeah.
respect to that question.
Sure. So okay, if you are a guy looking for some, you know, like secret magical, you know, oh, I'm just going to get this girl and I'm going to add notches to my belt, tantra-x is definitely not for you. Like, that's not, I'm not talking, there's so many products out there, there are things, oh, okay, I'm not that guy. I'm honestly, like, I don't care that goes on out there one way or another. It's not about, the world is doing what it's doing, right? So there are always people who are just, I'm going to notch it up. I'm not talking to those guys, and really, it's, when I say I don't care, what I mean is, like, it's not my job to change those guys, right? Those guys are they're operating just in a different realm. They're just kind of in this realm of sort of sexual scarcity. And when you're operating in the realm of sexual scarcity, it's all about, like, numbers and doing, and I got, it's like the game of sex, right? This really, Tantra-x and what I'm teaching is really about when a young man, and I don't mean age-wise, but I mean a young man is ready to step into becoming an adult male. And as an adult male, you have this Ferrari that you're driving, this potential, and you have to learn how to channel that energy. So, if you go through the program, there's no way, because I'm not talking to that guy who's, just like, hey, I banged some girls, I got one up, I did this technique. Are there going to be those people? Of course. But that's not who I'm talking to. What I'm talking to is the men who are ready to step up to being men. And for me, being a man is being able to be comfortable in your vulnerability, to be comfortable opening to a woman, to be comfortable sharing your deepest sexual desires. And this whole thing of, like, adding notches is about not sharing and not being vulnerable and not opening. But what we're teaching is really, like, no, I want you to have that experience of being able to open to a woman and share intimacy and pleasure and depth at a level that you just can't even imagine. So, in a way, for women who might be like, oh, what are you guys up to? What I'm up to is really giving you the chance to have quality men who want you to experience connection and depth and pleasure and intimacy and more freedom for yourself. And my experience is that, most women are, like, if we're Ferraris, they're like Indy cars. And, but they never get to be driven like an Indy car. They're all, their capacity for pleasure and release and freedom and transcendence is just incredible. And you need men who understand that and can help you experience things you can't experience just on your own or with a vibrator or through your own self-pleasure. And you're certainly not going to experience those things getting jackhammered, or there's a place and time for everything, but I'm saying, for most people, that's their sex life. It's actually more like this. It's like, and then so for women watching this, I'm like, I love women. I love women. There is zero in this product. In fact, I'm creating something for women, because I love them. I genuinely love them. I think they're incredible. There's a lot of people putting out product, and I don't necessarily believe that they love women. I think there's a lot of resentment and, stuff. I mean, because for guys, most of our lives, we get rejected. We're the ones getting rejected. So that builds up this kind of, can build up like this kind of resentment. So a lot of people learn skills and techniques just to kind of get back at women. That's not what this program is coming from. Like, I love women. You can see it in everything that I create. I want you to have more pleasure. I want you to have cool guys to connect with who are not shaming you. If understand from a woman's perspective, if she opens up and says, I've always wanted to try blah blah blah, fill in the blank, she runs the risk that the guy she's with is like, oh my god, that's disgusting. I would never do that, you slut. So the stakes are very high. You know, so especially socially for a woman, you know, like, oh, that's the, you know, like, girls get very catty and so do dudes. And, you know, on one hand, we're, you know, a lot of guys, the fantasy is like, I want the porn star, but the reality is that in here, there's this belief that she's actually, you know, not a good human. And so they want to have the experience, but there's a lot of judgment. So if a woman says, you know, hey, I would love to try anal sex. You know, a guy may, you know, a lot of guys are into it, but a lot of guys have a lot of judgment and shame. And so, you know, she runs the risk that they're like, ew, what, you know? So it's kind of it's an interesting dilemma. The only cool thing is I feel like the cultural discussion as a whole is changing. But for any women watching this, look, I want you to experience what is possible in your body and in your intimacy and in your depth and your connection and communication. And you need men who have some skills to help you do that.
That's awesome. So let's just see if I heard you correctly. And I'm going to kind of put this in the framework of who's going to benefit the most from the product. And I heard, you know, young men transitioning from this youthful idea of what sex might be to an adult, a very mindful and aware adult version of sex with you, and how you can benefit your mate or your partner, or whatever you call it. And so basically, this product is really kind of it's geared more towards males, because you have a different product that you're working on that's kind of geared more towards females. But I guess I might turn that on its head a little bit too. This is really for females to give to their males or tell them about. Say,
yes.
You need to do that. You need to be that person, and that's what I want. So, but really, it is kind of a male-oriented product, and how to be a better man, how to be a better mate, how to be a better lover, that type of stuff. And you know, from the perspective of the female, it's how can I get a better mate, a better lover, that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, and I will, you know, apropos of that is there were many women involved in the transcriptions and, you know, in the writing and creating and the artwork behind the product, and they would regularly like pull their men in and say, you need to listen to this, you know, come listen to this, because you got to understand, I mean this, I love women. I love them. I think they are incredible. They're amazing. So that framework is in everything that I'm teaching. And that's really the piece that's important to understand. They get it. Like, all the women that listen to this are like, oh my God, you know, our orgasms have gotten better, our communication, because we all want that. So, but there is this thing that has to happen in a man's life where he has to go from numbers, you know, like, because the game, the way it is played right now is women are, you know, no, and guys are like, I need numbers. And so there's this, is the essence of the sort of flirtation sex game we're playing. And women have in their head a number of partners that they can have before they lose value as a woman.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yes. So that is why, for women, when you ask how many sex partners they've had, I think there was a study in England that said, I think it was like the sweet spot for a woman was 3 to 5 prior partners. I can't remember, but it's in that neighborhood for a woman. And when she hits this like number, then she's quote unquote starts to lose value, because we start to get into our beliefs about, you know, what a good woman is, and, you know, she shouldn't have right. So she's acutely aware of this, and whether she calls it that or not. So what'll typically happen is, if you say, well, how many partners have you had? People ask that question in relationship. How many partners have you had? And, you know, and so she'll be like, oh, well, you know, I've had 3 or 4 or 5, whatever the number is. But she has a number, and like, if she crosses that line, it crosses. So, you know, oh, I was drunk, you know, that doesn't count. We were right. So there's this kind of interesting game that's played, and that's really what the game is. But for men, you've got to kind of get beyond that at some point and say, okay, well, I want more, and that more is that's really the entry point. It's not more numbers, it's more quality, more orgasmic bliss, maybe more depth, more intimacy, more freedom, more opportunities to have experiences. I find my experiences with the knowledge base that I have, that women will come to me, and I'm not, I don't need to convince people. I don't need, they're like, hey, I have this idea. What do you think about? Can we, I've had this fantasy of, can we try this? So they're coming to me because my framework is A, they get that I love them, B, they get that there's a non-judgmental quality, and C, I don't care what their numbers are. Like, I don't have that story in my head. What do you want to, we're people. We want to have it. We need to have experiences in order to feel alive. Right.
Well, that story seems so unfair to you because, it's a totally opposite story for a male, right?
Exactly.
For a woman, you're judged by the number of partners you have, too many being a bad thing, and for a man, you're judged by the number of partners you have too few being a bad thing.
Exactly.
It's like totally opposite. It's a total double standard. So I want to ask you something that comes up really regularly, and you've kind of touched on it earlier in the interview. There's a couple things that come up constantly, and usually it relates to rejection and self-confidence and those types of things. So, one thing I was curious about in tantra-x, can you kind of touch on how you can help people, how you can help men through the process of, first off, understanding, what rejection is, what it might mean to them, maybe a different paradigm, and then also how that can impact their self-confidence, both in the bedroom and outside of the bedroom. That'd be really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's a great, thank you. I mean, because that is a great question, because rejection is really a very much, if you're a living, breathing male, rejection is part of your life. So the thing is that what I find is really interesting there is that, so there's sort of two aspects of rejection. There's kind of the rejection game that's being played, where you meet a stranger and you start a conversation, and there are these, there's sort of this sussing out about perhaps becoming bed partners, and for women there's all kinds of things that, rightfully so, because women in our culturally, women are at choice. So they don't experience the universe as being this, like, not enough universe. There may not be enough quality, but there's certainly enough quantity. For men, quality is less of the issue. It's just, I need something, right? I need something. So this product is for those guys too, because here's the thing. You're doing things right now that are causing women to reject you. That we all are. I mean, myself included, right? There, because some women may be like, dude, you are way too comfortable in your body and in your sexuality, and I'm not. So, so it doesn't matter on the spectrum. This is not a, like, be all end all magic secret. This is like skills and tools for life, building sexual confidence, building confidence in business. Because look, even in business, man, a guy who's comfortable in his sexuality and understands what's going on, that's a very charismatic person. So you'll find that guys who learn about sexuality also improve in business, also improve in money. It's crazy, but it's how it works, because sexuality is so at the core of who we are. So for a guy who is, what's the word I'm going to say here? Like, he's afraid of rejection. Number one is, rejection's going to happen. There's no universe where you're not going to be rejected. So all I can say is that's one of those things where you just kind of have to be like, it's almost like even an exposure therapy where you just kind of have to get comfortable with that because that's part of it, right? And I've had, by the way, I mean, I'm speaking from experience. I mean, I remember one time I was thinking about, walking up to this girl and literally could not move my limbs and was overcome with like panic and like, and I had to like sit down on a bench because it was just such an intense experience. But the only way you get through that is through doing little acts of confidence building. So, for example, if you normally touch a girl like this is a typical like, boobies, or like, guys are clomping. I've seen guys today. I saw this guy was like, hey, what's up? And he's like slapping slapping the girl like she's a buddy.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, dude, you are not ever going to have, a quality sex life with those kinds of skills. They just don't know. So if you did the simplest thing where and I did this was the funny thing, I did this, so he's like slapping her and she's like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, I'm just saying like this, hey, what's up, and I walked up to her and in the exact same area, I just did a feather touch and her eyes were just like, right, because
like that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, man, because it's we all want to be touched. It's just you got to touch the right way at the right time in the right places, and these are all skills that have to be developed. So that guy, I know he thought he was attracted to that woman and he was like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna treat her like she's a buddy. No, you're not. That's not gonna cause sex to happen. Girls want to know that there's at least the chance that there is going to be a positive experience. And this is something that guys don't understand, is girls will reject you because of the way you touch, or maybe your breath smells, or they look and they go, I'll give you a chance, but if you're like a 3-second guy, it's just not worth it. And that's the thing that guys don't realize. They think like, oh, I've got a penis and she has a vagina and we're, and I've done my job. It's like, no, it really doesn't work that way. So girls are going to be so much more open to you if you demonstrate right away that you have an understanding about how to touch them, how to breathe, how to be relaxed in your body. And most guys have a lot of tension. So there's a lot of tension in these relationships, and those things these are what I call rejection triggers. Because if you're tense, if you're like, shaking to get her bra off, or you're like, hey, oh, and you're shaking and everything's going, like, this is just a clue to her that that's probably not going to be a fun experience. And I've been on the inside, so I've been where the girls are like, oh, I just got a text from 3-second guy. That's not going to be happening, because it's just not worth it. And a lot of guys, some lucky guys, I will say, who have good looks, really good looking guys, who are just like, hey, whatever, that's only going to take you so far. It'll work. Like you'll it's like bait, like they'll get girls, but girls will not be coming back because they're like, why? It's not worth it. And when you begin to learn the skills that I have in tantra-x, it will be worth it. It will be, because they'll be like, that was nice. I want more of that. I want more of that. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty. And it's actually pretty simple.
Well, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want to be sure I get at least one more question in here. Really what I wanted to ask is, what do you think the top 3 things are that tantra-x teaches people and could actually change their life for the better? Like, I hate to ask those types of top 3 questions, but really, if you can kind of summarize it, what would be just like the top 3 things that people are going to get out of this, and they can walk away and they can say, I'm a better person more involved with myself in this program. I love.
Yeah. Hello. Okay. Well,
Yes.
top thing number one.
Great for Halloween.
Yes. Okay. So, top 3 life-changing skills that I explore in tantra-x. And by the way, I look at tantra-x as a lifetime body of work, because the world changes, tastes change, people change, understandings change, and so to me it's an ongoing process, the learning, right? Because that just is, that's my framework. I am always learning about sexuality. So I think, that is one of the top things, is to understand that sex and the ability to experience passion and pleasure is a path, not a goal, right? So if you took the framework of, I am wandering down a path and I'm going to enjoy the path, the process, that framework alone, it can be revolutionary for people, because we culturally and sexually tend to be, let's stick a flag, let's run to the top of the mountain and stick a flag in it, man. And that's like considered to be the victory, right? And I would call this sort of the chasing orgasm modality. So number one, just enjoy the process. Just enjoy, it's fun. It's pleasurable. There's a lot to experience. So like, slow down and enjoy the ride. So that's one of those frameworks, shifting from, I got to get her off, or she's got to get me off, which is our goal-oriented thing, to just, wandering down the mountain road and enjoying what's happening along the way. And there's just so many things to explore. So that's number one. Number 2 is that it is natural and normal for you to have desires, and some of those desires are potentially going to be a little bit off or awkward, or if you're really getting in touch with your sexuality, you're going to go through different things, right? And certainly the internet has exposed us to things that, you're just like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible, right? But we all have sort of these little secret things that we would love, we wish we could share with a partner, or maybe they were afraid of being rejected, or maybe we think like, oh my God, nobody will ever love me if they really knew, blah, blah, blah. So the life-changing concept number 2 is that as long as it's among consenting adults, it's all good. And I feel like ultimately we have a responsibility to explore these parts of ourselves, to live in our authentic sexuality. And that if you have this thing, like, I'm really into feet, and I want to really explore that you can have that. You can ask, you can talk to your partner, you can, you want to have a relationship where you are able to communicate and share and be vulnerable and have that be a yes. And not only a yes, a hell yes. Hell yes, let's explore that. That sounds great. Because we're enjoying the ride, as opposed to like I said, sort of this, that's in contrast to point A in slot B in missionary position. In which case that would just seem like, oh my, how could you want feet? That's disgusting. No, we're everybody, including the people that protested, and I don't feel that, no, we're human. So kind of recognizing that to be human is to be sexual, and to be sexual is to be human. And then probably the third top thing is what I will call the non-judgmental, compassionate touch and compassionate way of thinking, where you have the ability to realize that it's okay, like pleasure is okay, that I can see you in your desire, and be vulnerable with you and your desire and my desire, and that's normal, that's a positive, that's a beautiful thing. And I feel like one of the things that drove me to create this course as well is just, that I don't feel like I should be the only man who understands how amazing it is to be able to share sexually with somebody and just have that intimacy and love and connection and depth and just realize like just how good those things can be. They're life-changing, they really are. But it's like anything, you're not going to find those if you're driving, as hard as you can for 3 minutes, pile driving. You're not going to have a chance to discover all of this amazing stuff along the way. And then my sneak in fourth important life-changing thing is just that women are sexual beings, and they're amazing, and they're sexual badasses, man, and they are willing to try and do and experience, because that's an inherent drive and desire in the female psyche. And if we as men can understand that and help them cultivate that and experience that, even, it's beautiful, where it's like a win on every level. So,
well, I'll tell you what, and we are basically out of time, so I want to kind of bring this interview to a close. I just feel really lucky to be able to talk to you. I mean, I actually feel like I kind of got a little bit of a counseling session.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Yeah. Well, I hope so, man, because I want you to know, and anybody listening to this, like, I feel your pain, man. I've been there. I genuinely have. It kind of makes me want to cry. I mean, honestly, but I mean, I have been there where I have felt that, such separation from my body and from my pleasure, and feeling so ashamed of my desires, and it was such a painful time in my life, man. It was such a painful. I just wouldn't wish that on anybody, and I think that's where, if you're lucky enough to have encountered, this interview, for example, and you can walk away realizing like, hey, it's okay for you to feel what you feel. It's normal, it's natural, and it's part of life. I hope you take that away and realize that my whole program is created from that perspective, because it's just important that you realize just how beautiful it is to be an alive, functional, adult, sexual, masculine man, and how complex and beautiful that can be, and that's okay.
Well, one thing I want to bring up too, you've also got a website of your own aside from the tantra-x product. Can you tell people what that website is, Lawrence?
Yeah, that's lawrencelanoff.com, and that's LAWRENCE, LAN as in Nancy, OFF.com, lanoff.com. So, and I've just got some stuff, some workshops and things that'll be up on there, and between the two.
I've read some of your stuff. It's actually really good. I found great value out of going to the website, and I hope people who are watching this interview do go check it out, because there was just some good stuff there for me. I won't disclose what it is, because everybody's going to have a different thing.
Yeah.
I thought it was well worth the trip.
Yeah, awesome. Good. Yeah, it's you'll see the theme. I mean, really, at the end of the day, I really just want to help you change your beliefs and feel more pleasure in your body, and you deserve it.
Well, I'll tell you what, thank you for this time, and I'll go so far as to say this extraordinary interview. This is really not what I think a lot of people would expect, and in some ways this was even very different than what I had kind of expected, because everybody's got this preconceived notion about sex, and they've got a preconceived notion about what all these other things are that we talked about, confidence, rejection, and I really appreciate your approach, and I'm really looking forward to your product. So, with that said, thank you so much, Lawrence. I appreciate your time today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you. And until we meet again, all I can say is have more fun in bed.